Hey everyone! Tonight, let's embark on an adventure under an ancient Aegean sky. Picture the sea air filled with salt, and the streets of Rhodes softening beneath the shuffle of sandals. Imagine yourself looking up, not at your phone, but at a vast expanse of twinkling stars. It's the 2nd century BC, and a quiet mathematician named Hipparchus is squinting at the sky, carefully counting stars as if anyone would truly need all those dots meticulously recorded. Spoiler alert, you might not make it through this narration fully awake. Before you settle in, take a moment to give a thumbs up to the video and subscribe. Only if you genuinely enjoy what I create here though. To bring a little life to this digital space, feel free to share your location and local time in the comments. I really love seeing how we're all gazing at screens and stars from our unique corners of the world. Now let's dim the lights, perhaps turn on a fan for a gentle background hum, and ease into this journey together. You find yourself on the island of Rhodes, with the sun sinking into the sea and the warm air still carrying the scent of olive groves. Hipparchus doesn't have a telescope, a bright star app, or even a flashlight to blunder over his sandals. Instead, what he possesses is an incredible amount of patience. You watch as he picks up a stick from the ground, drawing a line to find north, then spends the night aligning his view with painstaking care. He recognizes the familiar constellations, Orion, the Pleiades, and the graceful curve of Cygnus, but for him, they aren't simply tales told around the fire. They represent coordinates, pieces of a puzzle, data points yearning for meaning. You follow closely as he points, murmuring numbers to himself in Greek, jotting down notes slowly on a wax tablet. At this point, his beard likely gathers more candle wax than ink, yet he perseveres. Here's a fun fact. Hipparchus was born around 190 BCE and operated mainly from Rhodes, where he rose to become one of the greatest astronomers of antiquity. He catalogued nearly 850 stars, documenting their positions with a level of accuracy never seen before. Just think about that. Every star he logged was a direct observation made with his own eyes. You might think your last school assignment was draining? He spent endless nights measuring stars, night after night, for decades. Now, here's a quirky little tidbit. Some ancient writers suggested Hipparchus stumbled upon the precession of the equinoxes by chance. He was merely attempting to align bright stars with older records when he noticed that the celestial background had shifted a bit. It's like the universe decided to photobomb his painstakingly kept notebook. This cosmic wobble is incredibly slow, a degree every 72 years. So no one had really caught on, except perhaps some Babylonian stargazers whispering their hunches. Historians still debate whether Hipparchus drew inspiration from much older Mesopotamian documents, or if this was entirely his own innovative insight sparked by looking up at a particularly stubborn star that refused to align with the old scrolls. Either way, as you lean back and gaze upward, for just a fleeting moment, you can almost sense that wobble. You'd only need to wait about 26,000 years for Earth's axis to complete that dance. Hope you brought snacks. The streets surrounding you are tranquil. Somewhere in the distance, a donkey huffs, unimpressed by all of this astronomical ambition. Hipparchus hardly notices. He meticulously counts stars recorded by others, comparing them to his new observations, quietly muttering about discrepancies. For him, the heavens aren't merely a poetic tapestry. Though yes, Homer may have weaved lovely verses. They resemble an unsorted spreadsheet, columns obstinately refusing to align. You observe him as he checks brightness by extending his thumb to gauge star qualities directly. It feels somewhat childlike, yet this straightforward method will eventually lay the groundwork for his system of measuring star brightness. It's not lost on you how many things in life you've measured with just your hand spans or thumbnails. Hipparchus is essentially creating stellar Yelp reviews, without the negative one-star critiques. What's oddly calming about this scene is how little changes around you. Night after night, he returns to the same rooftop viewpoint, candle flickering by his side, leaning over that wax tablet to make more notes. You inch a bit closer, pretending to lend a hand, though if you're honest, you're more likely to spill his ink than actually be of assistance. He's deeply immersed in a silent debate with the cosmos. A gentle breeze sweeps across the colonnade. The stars remain unwavering, even though they are all moving pretty fast by cosmic measures. Still, you'll forgive them for their masquerade of permanence. Hipparchus may not grasp modern physics regarding stellar drift, but he has already detected something subtle about the heavens. They aren't just a static artwork. They are alive, dynamic, affecting a timescale far slower than any human story. Another noteworthy fact: he drew influence from earlier Greek mathematicians like Aristarchus and Euclidean geometry lessons, merging pure mathematics with observational tenacity. For him, astronomy is nothing less than geometry inscribed upon the very sky. Imagine him softly reciting angles, as if he's piecing together a puzzle where the segments are light years vast and faintly twinkling. You shuffle forward, still trailing Hipparchus into the quiet courtyard. Tonight, he's engrossed in a collection of instruments that might seem like children's toys abandoned on the beach, but they are really the lifeblood of an ancient astronomer. You watch him carefully set down an armillary sphere, an intricate arrangement of bronze rings nested within one another, resembling a tiny metallic playground that seems to have gotten stuck in a geometry lesson. He runs his finger along the circle representing the celestial equator, then taps the line for the ecliptic, adjusting it as if he could coax the heavens to align themselves. You can almost feel the absurd patience this requires. There's no telescope, no magnification beyond what your eyes can offer. Every observation hinges on aligning sight lines through a narrow slot, trusting that both your hand and the earth will hold still just long enough. Spoiler alert, either does. You stifle a yawn while he fusses with the clamps. Almost, you considered offering him a wrench. You realize you just invented it 2,000 years ahead of schedule. A common fact floats into your mind: the armillary sphere. While today it may be more of a curiosity one might spot in a museum corner or a Harry Potter-themed shop, was actually one of the most serious instruments used in ancient Greek astronomy. Its rotating rings modeled the movements of the sky, allowing Hipparchus to track the position of constellations night after night. When he rotates a ring to align with a bright star, he's essentially taking an ancient coordinate reading. Here's a quirky tidbit. Legend has it that Hipparchus might have used small wax cords across the sphere's rings to emulate the paths of wandering planets, sort of like a rubber band hack you'd come up with when the official equipment falls short. Just imagine one of antiquity's greatest mathematicians doing what any kid would do with a craft project, tying things together to keep them from wobbling too much. You can't help but chuckle as you picture him grumbling about ancient duct tape. Still, scholars debate whether Hipparchus crafted an improved version of the astrolabe, or simply borrowed from previous innovations in Alexandria. Some give him credit for enhancements that laid the groundwork for Claudius Ptolemy's dazzling intricacies centuries later. Others argue he was merely one link in a long chain of collective invention, refining instruments the same way you might adjust the brightness on your phone. Nothing groundbreaking, just better. Historians furrow their brows over this conundrum like it's the biggest cliffhanger in academia, while you and Hipparchus exchange quiet yawns beneath the stars. To probe the skies, he pulls out a gnomon, essentially just a tall stick planted upright to cast shadows. A glorified sundial, you muse, and you're not wrong. But take a closer look. With this humble stick, Hipparchus can trace the sun's angle throughout the year, mark solstices, and validate the predictions of his armillary sphere. You kick a bit of dust by the gnomon's base, and he gently scolds you, as if you've just disturbed the Hubble telescope. The earthy details wrap around you. The stones of the walkway are cool now, retaining heat from the day. The aroma of grilled fish clings to the night air. Neighbors have wrapped up their dinners, but Hipparchus is utterly absorbed in his work. He sketches something with a stylus on wax, numbers meticulously drawn with obsessive precision. The reality sinks in. Astronomy was never just a solitary genius gazing dreamily at the stars. It involved countless hours of careful comparisons, tedious alignments, and measuring shadows on sundials until your knees ached. He extracts yet another tool, a dioptra, essentially a flat plate equipped with sighting rods for surveying. In modern terms, you'd call it a primitive theodolite. Except if you whispered that word here, the nearby goat would just give you a blank stare. By looking across its edge, he can measure star altitudes with greater accuracy, linking celestial locations with points on Earth. Suddenly you grasp his dual interests, not just the sky above, but how this knowledge can anchor geography and mapping. You begin to suspect that his cramped wax tablets might contain more world-shaping information than any royal decree ever issued. Mainstream fact break. Hipparchus constantly cross-referenced his instruments, always searching for confirmation. To him, the discrepancies between measurements weren't mistakes to be avoided. They were tangible evidence that the universe itself held subtle irregularities. Sometimes he would jot down 3 different results side by side, refusing to discard them until he noted clear patterns. Meticulous hardly captures it. And here's a fun fringe tidbit. Some rumors suggest that Hipparchus owned a star globe, crafted from metal, with tiny dots hammered or punched in it to mark star positions. If that's true, it would have resembled a celestial soccer ball, rolling away if you weren't careful. There's nothing quite like staring at the heavens only to accidentally kick them across a courtyard. Unfortunately, this globe has been lost to history, with only vague mentions of it remaining. You can't help but envision Hipparchus cradling it at night, muttering that children had better not play catch with it. The debate endures through the ages. Did these tools provide enough accuracy to validate Hipparchus? You find yourself comfortably settled by the edge of the courtyard, leaning against a sturdy column, as Hipparchus embarks on one of his slow, almost hypnotic rituals, counting constellations. The night sky is clear, and a gentle Aegean breeze whispers through the nearby olive trees, bringing with it the serene, salty scent of the sea. He squints, adjusts the angle of his well-worn dioptra, and begins murmuring his soft tally, star by star, as if he were calling roll in an impossibly vast classroom. You almost imagine him saying, "Orion? Here. Lyra? Here. And that faint star near Capricorn? Still hanging in there, I see." His task is undeniably monotonous, and yet it suits you perfectly. Each whisper of his count makes your shoulders relax a little more. Each star resembles a sheep leaping over a cosmic fence. The slower he counts, the dreamier you feel, as if the entire universe is working together to lull your mind into a state of tranquility. There's one undeniable truth that keeps you grounded. Hipparchus is credited with cataloging about 850 stars. While earlier traditions often grouped stars into mythic shapes, he was adamant about not only naming them but also fixing their precise positions relative to one another. His catalog serves as the ancestor of countless star maps that followed, almost like those pages imprinted themselves into the very essence of every celestial chart created in the centuries to come. Here's a quirky tidbit. In some obscure later sources, it seems Hipparchus occasionally grouped stars into clusters that haven't made it into our modern constellation list. Picture him, hunched over under lamplight, sketching what he dubs that faint zigzag near Pegasus, or casually jotting down a vague cluster that resembles a goat standing on one hoof. Had those whimsical labels lingered through time, perhaps you'd find yourself in bed today, attempting to spot the illustrious odd zigzag near Pegasus constellation. Historians continue to debate whether Hipparchus' catalog stood on its own or only survived through Ptolemy's Almagest, assembled centuries later. Did Ptolemy borrow extensively, or did he simply trace line by line from those earlier notes? Scholars toss this discussion back and forth like a deflated historical volleyball, never quite landing on a definitive answer. What remains clear is that between Hipparchus and Ptolemy, the heavens were captured in systematic tables that transformed astronomy forever. You lean in a little closer again, observing as Hipparchus glides his finger across the evening sky. Orion's belt stands sharp and steady. The delicate seven sisters cluster together shyly. The tail of Scorpio curves like a glowing hook. He doesn't pause to marvel at their beauty. He simply notes where each one sits, as though he's checking off items on a shopping list. You can't help but chuckle internally, envisioning him as a cosmic grocery clerk. Constellation Isle 4, neatly stacked and duly noted. To keep organized, Hipparchus refers to the works of older Greek poets who immortalized certain star patterns in verse. While those poets saw gods on thrones, mighty hunters, and mythical monsters gracing the heavens, he sees raw mathematics. When someone else sighs at Orion drawing his bow, Hipparchus mutters quietly to himself, "Approximately 3 degrees down from Aldebaran, plus a correction for seasonal drift." It's possibly the least romantic pillow talk imaginable, yet it's the perfect tone to encourage you to drift off. Nothing jolting, nothing fiery, just steady and methodical. What captivates you as you observe him is how he organizes everything both vertically and horizontally, recording not just brightness but also the distances between them. In a way, he's weaving a cosmic grid, long before GPS technology, long before anyone envisioned a device that could guide you to the nearest bakery. For Hipparchus, that pastry map is replaced by the careful scaffolding of stars surrounding the celestial pole. A mainstream fact to consider. Much of what we know about constellations today, their Greek origins, their inherited mythic narratives, owes their survival to individuals like Hipparchus who meticulously recorded them. Without his rigid structure, some star shapes might have faded into obscurity, stories lost to the winds of changing cultures. His list served as scaffolding upon which future astronomers, sailors, and storytellers constructed their interpretations. And here's a fringe tidbit worth pondering. Some theorists suggest he may have been influenced by Egyptian decanal stars, those integral to clocks and calendars in Nile temples. Just imagine, then, Hipparchus potentially sneaking in a few Egyptian constellations into his catalogue, tucking them in amid his Greek counterparts. Unfortunately, the records are too sparse to confirm such musings. Yet, it's a fascinating idea that while sitting above Rhodes, he might have whispered Egyptian star names, transforming the sky into a quiet collaboration between cultures. As you take a deep, slow breath, you notice the constellations remain steadfast, as if they know their only duty is to be reliable. Hipparchus ticks another star off his wax tablet like a man resigned to an eternity of chasing celestial dots. You recline against the cool stone floor, catching glimpses of faint torchlight flickering down by the harbor. But overall, the city has hushed into a quiet lull. For you, the calm monotony feels soothing. For him, it's the sacred task of immortalizing the heavens themselves. You watch as he holds his gaze longer on the Pleiades, weighing their positions. You find a comfortable spot as Hipparchus embarks on a new ritual, assigning brightness, numbers, categories, order. He's determined that these twinkling dots cannot go unranked, and you soon find yourself lulled into the calm, repetitive rhythm of his proto-spreadsheet in the sky. This is the inception of what we now recognize as the magnitude scale, the original Yelp for stars, and the glossy stars will never complain about their ratings. With a fluid motion, he lifts his hand again, extending his thumb for rough comparison. One by one, each star is scrutinized. Very bright, somewhat bright, faint, but still visible if you tilt your head dramatically to the left. To our modern eyes, this may seem quaintly unsophisticated, but in 2nd century BC Rhodes, it's nothing short of revolutionary. You can almost picture him penning down his findings. Sirius equals 5 stars. Literally. Here's a fact. Hipparchus indeed categorized stars into 6 levels of brightness. The brightest stars, like Sirius, Vega, Arcturus, were assigned to the 1st magnitude. The faintest ones visible to the naked eye fell into the 6th magnitude. Anything lower was simply irrelevant to him, considering he didn't have access to binoculars or massive telescopes atop mountains. The framework he proposed over 2,000 years ago has been expanded and fine-tuned, yet the basic structure remains intact even today. A fun tidbit to consider. Some later sources suggest that Hipparchus may not have been fond of the number 6. Why choose 6 categories? Why not 5 or 10? Perhaps it was a nod to the ancient Greeks' preference for tidy numeric groupings. Or maybe he simply ran out of patience after staring into the starry void for too long. Picture him letting out a sigh. Alright, there appear to be about 6 flavors of starlight. Good enough. Now let's go eat lentils. Historians continue to debate whether Hipparchus invented the magnitude system entirely on his own or borrowed from earlier Greek traditions. Was he building on existing linguistic conventions, like describing certain stars as bright and others as faint, or was he formalizing those ideas into something more structured? The discussion often feels less about the stars themselves and more about scholarly prestige. Who really deserves credit for developing a system to categorize the brightness of objects in the vast sky that everyone could easily behold? You shift a bit, gazing upward toward his gesturing hand. The 1st magnitude stars, the shining beacons, pop out at you easily. Then the faint 6th magnitude ones have you squinting hard, rubbing your temples as you do. The struggle becomes palpable, and you empathize, Recognizing the challenge it must have posed for him night after night, straining his vision without glasses and using mere clay lamps that dazzled the eyes. Yet he pressed on. You think about your small battles, like trying to find one faint app icon on your crowded phone screen in bright daylight. His nightly endeavor wasn't entirely dissimilar. Now he writes, on wax, over and over again. Magnitude I Sirius, Vega, Arcturus. Magnitude 2, Capella, Procyon. The list goes on monotonously. The sheer repetition starts to weigh on your eyelids. It's akin to counting sheep in the cosmic realm, but the shepherd is a determined Greek mathematician who doesn't seem to intend on stopping his tally. A laugh bubbles up as you envision him in a public square, announcing his rankings as though he's hosting a talent show. Tonight's top star in the sky, Sirius. Please shine humbly for your adoring fans. The audience is half dozing off, and honestly, so are you. As a mainstream nod, it's worth noting that the concept of magnitudes is still tied to Hipparchus' name in textbooks. His basic 1 through 6 classification system remains the foundation for astronomical measurement even now, though brightness is determined in incredibly precise logarithmic terms today. His categories became the seeds that eventually grew into the field of photometry. And here's an intriguing fringe fact. Some medieval Arabic manuscripts suggested additional categories beyond the 6th magnitude, hinting that perhaps Hipparchus scribbled down stars that were barely visible under optimal conditions. If that's true, our modern inclination towards expansion isn't as novel as we might think. His system could have had some wiggle room tucked away. Imagine him adding in a secret. Category 7. Stars you can almost convince yourself you saw if you squint hard enough. The debate continues quietly among scholars. How precise was his grading of the star magnitudes? Did he genuinely check for consistency across several nights? Could fatigue on a particular night have elevated a dim 5th magnitude star to 4th simply because his eyes were weary? It's a reminder that science, at its core, is inherently human, constructed from tired eyes and imperfect notes. As Hipparchus speaks softly in his murmuring Greek accent, you find yourself thinking about modern rating systems, thumbs-up videos, 5-star product reviews, heart emojis on comments. It strikes you that he was one of the earliest creators of such a scale. He's Yelp ing the cosmos, reviewing the universe on Amazon-style ratings. And the stars never even asked to be judged. Above, the heavens drift by with tranquil slowness. Orion continues to stretch. The Pleiades maintain their cluster. Your breathing synchronizes with their cadence. Each star now enters your consciousness as a number, soft and flat. 1, 2, 3. The brightness levels blend into nothing more than a lullaby of categories. Hunched over, Hipparchus jots on his wax tablet once more. The lamplight flickers. You contemplate that he must have found a sense of security in this routine. At the very least, his notepad must have become a comforting companion in a vast sky filled with mysteries. Hipparchus straightens up from his wax tablet, still rubbing the tiredness from his eyes after staring intensely at the faint silhouettes of 6th magnitude stars. Tonight, instead of continuing to catalog more celestial dots, he pulls out a small bundle of cracked clay fragments and rolls of papyrus, ancient records from civilizations that predate his own. You lean in a little closer, sensing that he's about to do something both bold and unconventional. He's going to compare his fresh observations with the Babylonian sky notes. It's not exactly glamorous. In fact, it feels more like a paperwork gathering with constellations as the exclusive guests. The flame from the torch flickers, casting quirks of light around the room, and Hipparchus murmurs to himself, not about the myths and gods of old, but rather about patterns of eclipse cycles. He wears the expression of someone grappling with a complex Sudoku puzzle late at night. You observe him as he carefully unrolls one of the Babylonian tablet copies, your eyes growing wide with the endless lists of dates and cosmic occurrences. Eclipses, both solar and lunar, laid out in meticulous fashion, with scribes noting when the day abruptly lost its brightness or when the moon took on a mysterious invisibility. This meticulous documentation forms the underpinnings of astronomy, those monotonous foundational aspects everyone tends to overlook while rushing towards the alluring discoveries. But for Hipparchus, this very monotony is where the magic lies. Here's a commonly known fact to kick your drowsiness. Hipparchus indeed relied heavily on centuries of Babylonian celestial records, which included thorough accounts of eclipse events. By harmonizing his own star charts with their extensive timelines, he significantly enhanced the precision of lunar and solar models. This intersection of cultures granted Greek astronomy a depth it had yet to reach on its own. He wasn't reinventing the wheel. He was merely making sure the wheels turned in perfect harmony. Now for a curious detail. The Babylonians, in their relentless observations, sometimes articulated celestial anomalies in unexpectedly relatable terms. They spoke of eclipses as if the moon had been bitten, akin to a cosmic cookie missing a chunk. You can almost visualize a scribe from centuries past jotting down in cuneiform, "Moon snack again, city mildly concerned." Hipparchus sits absorbed in these notes, with the enthusiasm of a worker combing through customer feedback after hours. Historians continue to debate whether Hipparchus had direct access to the original cuneiform tablets, likely locked away in Mesopotamian archives, or if he worked with Greek translations made in Alexandria. If he did manage to touch the originals, he would have been deciphering ancient wedge-shaped symbols inscribed thousands of years earlier, possibly giving him a thrill beneath his heavy robe. If only he'd had access to a Rosetta Stone for those cosmic snacks. More likely, though, he dealt with Greek-filtered compilations, second-hand yet rich with valuable insights. Even today, scholars argue over just how intimately he grasped Babylonian numerical concepts. You steal a glance at him, noticing the way he fluidly tracks their patterns. He reads about eclipses dating back to the 500s BC, then tightens his jaw and crunches the numbers. 27 days and a bit more. Full moons, then diminished moons. The geometry of Earth's shadow unfolds from an intense gaze at the stars. As his lips silently form words, you find yourself nodding along. It's entrancing, almost like listening to someone gently counting coins in an endless jar. He scratches notes on his tablet. Eclipse lunar. Seen near Taurus. Timing, fits with cycle. The stylus squeaks softly against the wax surface. He's not surprised anymore. He has grown to expect this order, yet affirming each detail is an essential part of his ritual. For you, reclining against that stone courtyard, it feels as if you're listening to the universe exhale slowly in a calming rhythm. Another noteworthy point: Babylonian astronomers had long before identified the Saros cycle, a period of just over 18 years, after which eclipses recur with similar geometry. Hipparchus sees that insight like a carpenter receiving a shiny, new hammer. With it, he tightened his lunar theories, crafting something remarkably more dependable for predictions. And here's a quirky tidbit. Some stories hint that Hipparchus proposed a lunar model featuring epicycles so bizarrely intricate that it somewhat resembled a comedic illustration. Picture smaller circles rotating atop larger ones, like celestial gears or a clumsy cosmic Rube Goldberg contraption. Historians toy with this theory, uncertain if it was an idea he quickly dismissed or a wild notion preserved in a fit of confusion by scribes. Regardless, it offers a glimpse into the iterative trial and error that formed the backbone of ancient science. The debate still rumbles on. Just how keen was Hipparchus' understanding of eclipse forecasting? Some assert he boasted extraordinary accuracy, sufficient to predict eclipses decades in advance. Others contend he was more circumspect, hedging his notes with approximate, rather than providing firm timings. Scholars sift through fragile parchment remnants searching for answers with the longing of dreamers trying to recall fleeting dreams. There, then gone in an instant. The rhythm of his eclipse calculations flows steadily onward. He compares ancient records with his own observations, inking tiny corrections and murmuring in Greek about discrepancies measured in minutes or degrees of arc. You find yourself lulled by the beat, as if each eclipse is merely another sheep to guide over the fence. Tonight you silently join in the count. Total eclipse of the moon, 3. Partial eclipse, 4. Scribble correction, 5. It may not be flashy, but it's the astronomy equivalent of poetry, simple yet profound. Hipparchus slouched over his dusty wax tablets once more that evening, a clear restlessness in his gaze. It wasn't just about determining which star shone brighter anymore, nor was he merely jotting down the cycles of eclipses. The furrow deepened in his brow. Something unusual had caught his attention, a gradual, almost sneaky shift in the sky itself. As he murmured a phrase under his breath, you perked up. The precession of the equinoxes. To you, it sounded a bit like a name for a rock band, but for Hipparchus, it represented a revelation that shook the ancient notion of a perfectly stable sky to its core. You tilted your chin skyward, attempting to envision what he had uncovered. He was comparing his recent observations with older records from Babylon and Greece, trying to figure out why the equinoxes, the days when day and night are equal, failed to align neatly with the positions of certain stars. They had shifted forward, albeit only slightly, just a fraction of a degree. But that minor wobble hinted at something deeper. Perhaps Earth wasn't as steadfast as he had once believed. It's important to note that Hipparchus was the first person in recorded history to realize what we now refer to as the precession of Earth's axis. This phenomenon arises from the gravitational pull of the Sun and Moon, making our planet wobble slightly as if it were atop losing momentum. Completing one full cycle takes around 26,000 years. A timeline so extensive that if you wanted to witness the entire process this weekend, you'd need a series longer than all of human recorded history. Here's a quirky tidbit. Hipparchus made this remarkable discovery while engaged in something rather mundane. He was meticulously checking the positions of the equinoxes, essentially playing spot the difference between ancient star charts and his own recent measurements. Imagine stumbling upon a cosmic truth not through a sudden epiphany but by diligently shuffling papers and muttering to himself, "Hold on a second, that's not where it used to be." The universe seemed to have softly shifted while he was counting. Historians continue to debate whether Hipparchus fully grasped the significance of this wobble. Some scholars maintain that he understood its profound implications, that nothing in the heavens was fixed for eternity, altering not only calendars but how future generations would perceive constellations. Others argue he may have only vaguely recognized the inconsistency, observing the change without truly comprehending its cause. This debate remains alive, with each side brandishing fragments of dusty Greek phrases as evidence. With patience, he continued to scratch his notes onto the wax tablet, inscribing, "Equinox now appears in Aries, occurring slightly earlier than anticipated." Then he paused, pondering. Did the stars drift, or was it Earth that moved? It became a cerebral game of chess between celestial bodies that refused to comply with the predictability of the rules. You swayed gently, reflecting on how the true issue was not that the stars had changed at all. It was us wobbling slightly, as if we were a bit tipsy from gravitational influence, our entire planet tilting like a curious puppy. His mathematical flow remained steady and soothing. He sketched delicate geometric figures at the edges of his tablet, circles intersecting, arrows pointing in all directions. It almost made you chuckle because they resembled the doodles you create during tedious Zoom meetings. Yet here, those seemingly trivial sketches revealed the restless yearning of Earth's axis. Consider how monumental this discovery felt. For centuries, the universe had been perceived as stable, perfect, and unwavering. Then Hipparchus buried his nose deeper into eclipse records and noticed the cosmic rug had shifted ever so slightly. To ponder such a realization might induce unease, yet he approached it with the calmness of familiarity, diligently writing notes and remeasuring, refusing to succumb to panic. Another reminder worth noting: precession gradually alters the identity of the North Star over the centuries. At present, it's Polaris. During Hipparchus's time, it was Kochab and the Little Dipper. In about 10,000 years, it will be Vega. The stars audition for that role every few thousand years. You can't help but smile, thinking of Hipparchus as the first critic to notice the casting changes in this celestial theater. A fringe tidbit wafts in like a gentle breeze. Some academic circles speculate that Hipparchus might have even tried to calculate the total duration of this wobble. If so, his estimates were astronomically off by thousands of factors, but just imagine the audacity of suspecting a cycle extending beyond empires, dynasties, or even myths. He envisioned a stretch of time that would leave even philosophers scratching their heads. The debates endure. Did he leave sufficient notes to support his discovery, or did Ptolemy later embellish his claims in the Almagest? The remnants of scratchy parchment and ambiguous wording become the tools historians engage in a tug-of-war over, akin to children squabbling over who genuinely invented the swing set. Nonetheless, regardless of who gets to edit the historical footnotes later, Hipparchus's lonely scribbles on Rhodes undeniably shifted the way humanity perceives the skies. As you breathe softly next to him, the monotony of cosmic drift morphs into something surprisingly comforting. If the entire Earth can wobble gently, then perhaps you can too. You allow your weight to shift lazily, akin to a spinning top coming to a gradual stop. Your breath oscillates in harmony with this axis precession. Just like the stars have their subtle wobble, you find solace in your own gentle drowsiness. Hipparchus presses his stylus to the tablet one last time. Hipparchus is hunched again over his wax tablets tonight, but if you take a closer look, his gaze isn't lifted to the stars as it usually is. Instead, it's fixed on maps. Thin scrolls are sprawled across a low wooden table, the ink still dark and sticky to the touch. You can't help but wonder why, after so many nights of contemplating the cosmos, he would now turn his attention to the earth below. Then it strikes you, in his mind, the stars above and the geography beneath are intertwined in a way that others just don't grasp. He's quietly, obsessively pursuing something that many of his contemporaries have yet to pin down: longitude. Imagine this. The Greeks were adept at measuring latitude with impressive accuracy using the sun's position at noon. Sailors could confidently declare, "We are this many degrees north of the equator." That part was straightforward with a gnomon and a bit of geometry. But longitude? That presented a cosmic conundrum. Finding one's east-west position was elusive, leaving entire navies stumbling in the dark for centuries in search of a solution. Here's a fact to orient you. Hipparchus attempted to tackle the issue of longitude using lunar eclipses to determine the time differences between locations. Because a lunar eclipse is observed the same way from anywhere on Earth, just at slightly different moments, he figured that if he could compare notes from two cities, he could calculate how far apart they were on the east-west axis. It was a clever idea but highly impractical. Imagine coordinating between ancient Greeks and Rhodes and Babylonians in Babylon to shout, "Hey, when did your moon go dark?" across hundreds of miles sans the benefit of telephones. Cue the interesting bit. Later anecdotes suggest Hipparchus compared the endeavor to trying to order a drink in a noisy tavern. One just knows the response won't come until much later. Yet, fueled by determination, he scribbled furiously, convinced that with enough solid math, he could securely tether the dimensions of Earth to the starry heavens. You can almost hear him mumbling to himself, "Sure, this could also be solved with time zones, but let's be real, clocks aren't exactly a thing yet." Historians still debate whether Hipparchus actually put his theories to the test with experiments, or if he mostly relied on geometric diagrams. Some argue he used real eclipse data from Rhodes and Alexandria. Others contend he was confined to flights of imagination. Regardless, he certainly pushed the conversation forward centuries ahead of when accurate timepieces and telescopes made the endeavor feasible. As you observe him sketching circles and arcs, he's mapping cities not by landmarks or monuments, but in celestial coordinates. For Hipparchus, Rhodes and Rome aren't so different from Orion and Sirius. They're merely dots on a cosmic grid, a component of a much larger interconnected measurement system. You lightly trace one of his curves with your fingertip, marveling at how it connects the Earth to the sky, harbor to horizon. The repetitive nature of his diagrams has a comforting effect, akin to lined notebook paper filled to the last edge. Here's another fact. Hipparchus also created one of the earliest known attempts at a global map utilizing a grid of latitude and longitude. This concept later served as inspiration for Claudius Ptolemy's detailed Geographia in the 2nd century CE. Think of Hipparchus as the earnest designer doodling grids on ancient parchment, while absent-mindedly munching on lentils. Here's a fringe tidbit. Some whispers even suggest he speculated on the precise circumference of Earth, possibly refining earlier estimates made by Eratosthenes. If this is true, his figures may have been impressively close, though frustratingly inconsistent in how they were recorded. Paperwork can be a relentless adversary. Scholars today sift through those partially mutilated fragments like archaeologists examining half-erased grocery lists, wondering aloud, did he note 24,000 miles or 25? The debates swirl quietly but persistently. Did Hipparchus truly merge astronomy with geography? Or were future scholars attributing insights to him retroactively? Some argue his interest in cartography is overstated. Others contend his influence is evident in Ptolemy's eventual map design. The verdict remains elusive, and you can easily imagine a dusty old symposium where two academics passionately shake their fists in disagreement over whether longitude deserves to have Hipparchus credited for its exploration. Meanwhile, Hipparchus himself presses on, unfazed. He scratches out marks, adjusts his calculations, and nibbles on a figure. You picture his daily rhythm, mapping the heavens by night and geography by day. It's a cycle of endless tables and lists. To him, the stars and the islands scattered across the sea are all grid points waiting to be aligned. There's nothing glamorous about it. It's just a series of repetitions. As you exhale, you let your mind drift, following his gaze. Stars above, lines below. It forms a unifying structure, simple on the surface, yet deeply comforting in its sheer order. A thought slips into your mind like a soothing lullaby. If the world can be grid, if the heavens can be measured, then perhaps everything, even your wandering thoughts, can be peacefully organized too. You rest your head on your arm, listening to Hipparchus as he scribbles about equinoxes aligning with Earth's geography, and it sounds like a melodic lullaby. You drift into a light sleep, dreaming of sailboats navigating not by chance, but by a universe meticulously charted thousands of years ago. By the time he mutters the word longitude again, your eyelids close, and you find contentment in this vast, interconnected world. Hipparchus is practically buzzing with excitement tonight, at least as much excitement as a Greek mathematician, known for his serious reputation, can muster. Instead of counting constellations or fiddling with his bronze sphere, he's focusing on something a bit more elusive, the moon. You let out a soft sigh, knowing this will mean a long night filled with him scribbling calculations, muttering incomplete thoughts, and gazing up at that pale orb drifting across the Aegean sky. The moon has always been a favorite companion in the sky, bright enough to light the way home after a night out yet wildly unpredictable. Some nights it races ahead, on others it occupies strange positions, and at times it disappears altogether. You can almost picture Hipparchus shaking his stylus, mumbling, "You'd think after thousands of years studying you, we'd have figured you out by now." Here's a fun fact. Hipparchus compiled detailed lunar tables, striving to predict the moon's position and eclipses over the years. His work was among the most accurate of ancient times. Instead of treating the moon's orbit as a perfect circle, he acknowledged its eccentric path, recognizing that it wobbles around the Earth. This was a revolutionary step in his ongoing struggle against the messy realities of the cosmos. Here's a quirky detail. Hipparchus supposedly took the moon's epicycle into account, a fancy term for the little loop-the-loop curves that ancient astronomers used to explain irregularities in the heavens. If you've ever doodled spirals during a boring meeting, congratulations, you and Hipparchus share a common approach. Picture him explaining this to his friends. Sure, the moon makes little mini circles while it's doing its big circle. It all makes perfect sense. Cue some raised eyebrows and skepticism. Historians still debate whether Hipparchus' lunar model was predictive or merely retrospective. Did he genuinely foresee what the moon would do a decade later, or was he just fitting numbers to pre-existing patterns? Some argue that his predictions were impressive enough to amaze future astronomers, while others suggest that his accuracy has been somewhat inflated by later generations eager to label him infallible. As always, the discussion meanders on like a napping cello note. You lean your chin on your palm and listen to his rhythm of counting. He aligns the moon's rise with star positions, marking minutes and fractions of a degree along the way. It's a blend of steady breathing mixed with tedious arithmetic. Each time he notes something down, it sounds almost like a lullaby. 37 minutes late, half a finger higher, mark the tablet. Each phrase wraps around you like a comforting blanket. As expected, the moon proves to be a tough character to pin down. One night it appears thicker, another thinner, and then, poof, it vanishes. Hipparchus, somewhat resigned, chronicles its phases with the enthusiasm of a bureaucrat stamping paperwork. Yet, oddly enough, there's a certain calmness in that. The quiet determination, the refusal to make a fuss. It's the understated poetry of astronomy that helps lull you to sleep in the best possible way. Another interesting tidbit: Hipparchus' lunar tables laid the groundwork for later astronomers, especially Ptolemy, to predict eclipses with greater accuracy. Without Hipparchus, Ptolemy's Almagest might not have been the shining work it became. Hipparchus was the unsung hero, laying down the building blocks of calculation so another man, centuries later, could fancy himself a master architect. There are whispers that Hipparchus may have used Babylonian, zigzag functions, math shortcuts with zigzagging formulas, to track the moon's changing velocity. Imagine him muttering over an ancient scrap of paper that resembled graph paper, sketching out what looked like a jagged sawtooth pattern that, to him, explained the moon's acceleration. If that's true, he wasn't just patient, he was importing algebraic brilliance way ahead of formal education. Above, stars twinkle lazily while the moon lumberingly makes its way across the sky. Hipparchus writes another note. Difference: 1 degree off expectation. There's no dramatic shout of "Eureka!" or bold declarations from him. Instead, he lets out a subtle groan and makes another adjustment to his wax tablet. If you start to drift off against the cold stone wall, you can almost imagine the moon winking at you, as if to say, "He'll keep trying to catch me forever. Let him be. You just rest." And so, with Hipparchus absorbed in his wax tablet, diligently working on increasingly minute corrections, you let yourself drift like the moon, predictably, serenely. Following Hipparchus at this point feels a bit like trying to follow a particularly obstinate librarian who just won't stop shushing you. But tonight, under the same Rhodian night sky, he seems to pivot his thoughts away from his own meticulous notes to ponder what might lie hidden within the legendary Library of Alexandria. You can't help but tilt your head and wonder, did he ever stroll through those illustrious halls filled with scrolls, or were they merely the stuff of dreams conjured during his quiet walks in Rhodes? The reality of it is, unfortunately, just as dusty and unclear as those ancient manuscripts. Let's anchor ourselves with a familiar fact. Many scholars assert that Hipparchus drew extensively from earlier astronomical works, especially those rooted in the Alexandrian tradition. The library at Alexandria was rumored to house records from Egypt, Mesopotamia, and various other cultures. Even if Hipparchus never actually set foot on its marble floors, it's almost a certainty that scrolls or replicas from that esteemed place informed his star catalogue. His achievements stemmed from a collaborative spirit, not isolation. He borrowed, validated, and built upon the work of others. Now, let's indulge in a whimsical thought. Imagine him daydreaming about that grand library late at night, envisioning towering rows of papyrus scrolls stacked so high he'd need a ladder just to reach the top shelf for a sneeze. Scholars often joke that he might have grumbled about their organization even in Alexandria. Yes, but are your eclipses arranged alphabetically? No. TSK. Picture him as the fussy patron at the reference desk of the greatest library of antiquity. Historians have long debated whether Hipparchus ever physically journeyed to Alexandria. The evidence remains maddeningly elusive. Some accounts suggest he was well acquainted with the place, while others suggest he spent his entire life in Rhodes. This dispute hinges on the fragments of wording provided by later writers, leading contemporary academics to argue with the same fervor as children squabbling over whether Dad ever took them to Disneyland. Did he experience the intellectual thrill ride, or did he simply purchase a few postcards? In our imagination, Hipparchus remains unaffected by the chaos around him. If he did consult Alexandrian texts, it was with his usual slow and steady approach, comparing line by line, date by date. For him, reading old star records was far less about adventure, and much more like proofreading an astronomical spreadsheet. You lean sideways at this thought, imagining yourself wandering through those Alexandrian corridors in sandals, trailing your fingers along the papyrus edges. Scrolls overflowing with works from Greek playwrights and Babylonian mathematicians, the air thick and hazy with dust and the soft glow of oil lamps. Imagine gently unrolling a scroll marked with delicate stars. You slowly unfurl it, revealing an older catalogue with faint dots aligning in the direction of Orion. Hipparchus would unroll it, scan the contents with a furrowed brow, and quietly mutter, "I'm off by 1 degree. Sloppy." Now, to set the stage further. Alexandria stood as the intellectual crown jewel of Hellenistic civilization, established by Ptolemy II. It housed tens of thousands of scrolls, with some estimates reaching into the hundreds of thousands. The loss of this treasure to subsequent fires and dispersals is still mourned today. If Hipparchus tapped into that deep well even slightly, his accomplishments take on new clarity, not as the work of a solitary genius, but as that of a careful aggregator. An intriguing tidbit worth mentioning is that some modern scholars speculate he might have encountered lost works from Aristarchus of Samos at Alexandria. Aristarchus is known for proposing the radical idea of heliocentrism, the notion that Earth orbits the Sun. If Hipparchus encountered this theory, perhaps he dismissed it or entertained it privately without any public acknowledgement. Picture him savoring a glass of wine, contemplating. Interesting, but let's stick with geocentric math for now. Of course, whether this is true remains a tantalizing mystery. The scholarly debate regarding his sources unfolds like a tiresome yet endlessly recycled panel discussion at history conferences. Did he borrow ideas? Innovate? Expand upon them? The truth likely encompasses both aspects. You find a strange comfort in the repetitive nature of this discourse, much like the flickering of torchlight. Knowledge circulates from one hand to another, from scroll to scroll, face to weary face, until one man eventually manages to count enough stars and bring them into systematic order. Hipparchus continues to jot down notes, the sense of wax and ink mingling with the night air. He squints into the dim light, caught in that half-dream, half-calculation state. You become aware of how his nightly struggle intertwines with broader currents flowing through the Mediterranean. Ships bearing scrolls approach, scribes copying ancient texts, fragile knowledge whispered into eager ears. As the city of Rhodes sleeps lightly around him, in his mind, he is wandering through those scroll-filled avenues of Alexandria. He drifts through endless rows of papyrus while the sea outside whispers the same age-old lullaby. The images blend seamlessly together. His modest stone courtyard transforms into vast marble halls. Your eyes grow heavy, lulled by the rhythmic vision of one more scholarly figure murmuring to himself while navigating a labyrinth of scrolls. As you begin to drift off to sleep, you catch a final amusing glimpse. Hipparchus standing at the checkout counter of the Library of Alexandria, only to be told, "Sorry, sir, we don't have lending privileges." He exhales a resigned sigh, shrugs his shoulders, and promptly memorizes every line. That, you realize, is the essence of who he was. Your gaze catches on Hipparchus as he leans over his work, the flickering light of the lamp casting a gentle glow across the papers scattered around him. His thoughts tonight aren't tangled in the usual concerns of borrowing Alexandrian scrolls or debating the theories of Greek philosophers. Instead, he immerses himself in the intricate maps of the stars that he meticulously crafts. Yes, the paper, or more frequently the papyrus, before him is marked with ink dots that appear as if sketched by someone more enamored with geometry than with artistry. You get drawn in, leaning a bit closer, careful not to disturb the inky silence of this moment, because to him, each of these sheets is a treasure. It's a well-known fact that Hipparchus is often hailed as the creator of one of the earliest extensive star catalogues, noting the coordinates of somewhere around 850 stars, or perhaps even more, depending on what has stood the test of time. This was no longer simple text. He put great care into calculating the stars' positions, transforming dots and lines into maps of the cosmos. Imagine someone in a distant city wanting to find Vega. Hipparchus' maps could guide them. But here's an interesting detail tucked away in the scrolls. The stars didn't receive ornate illustrations on his papyri. Unlike the detailed, beautifully adorned celestial maps that would come later in the medieval period, his drawings were bound to be quite sparse, easily resembling a child's connect-the-dots activity. Except all the numbers were missing. Not particularly eye-catching for a young one's bedroom walls, yet immensely practical. It's striking how the concepts of boring and groundbreaking can converge in such an unexpected way. Historians continue to debate whether Hipparchus used absolute positions with precise geometric diagrams or if his catalogue leaned more into descriptions through stellar coordinates. Since Ptolemy later wove much of Hipparchus' work into the famed Almagest, it's challenging to pinpoint exactly what those original papyrus maps looked like. Some scholars even ponder whether Hipparchus added near-invisible cross-hatching to indicate relative distances, while others suspect he didn't bother with any decorative strokes at all. Yes, the scholarly conversation of, did he doodle or not, has survived for 2 millennia. You find yourself imagining Hipparchus dipping his reed pen into ink, placing a small dot for Betelgeuse with focused precision. Then, he steps back and frowns before carefully marking another dot for Rigel, adding a few gentle lines to sketch the outline of Orion. Step by step, he returns to his work, nose nearly brushing the paper as he compares faint star clusters he noted the week before with the positions he's mapping tonight. It's a comically slow process, yet oddly tender, his meticulous way of grasping the vastness of the cosmos, physically pinning it down to the papyrus. Your breath starts to steady as you visualize endless scrolls filled in this manner, each rolled up gently and stored away in clay jars, perhaps even moth-eaten after years of neglect. A faint smile appears on your lips, imagining the thrill archaeologists would feel to discover even a single intact Hipparchus map today, knowing that most of them have likely perished. Fire, mold, sloppy hands of careless scribes, boring yet tragic elements like time and negligence have quietly erased these groundbreaking charts. Another noteworthy detail: fragments uncovered in later years reveal that Hipparchus was the first to assign precise celestial coordinates of stars in terms of latitude and longitude. This astronomical system is astonishingly similar to what we still utilize today. Each modern observatory, filled with high-tech computers and satellites, owes some of its methods to this man squinting at papyrus by candlelight. There's a fascinating fringe detail that comes to mind: some tantalizing remnants found at Oxyrhynchus in Egypt, discovered not long ago, might be direct pieces of a lost Hipparchus star catalogue. Picture those fragments resurfacing from the sands, reminiscent of puzzle pieces emerging after 2 millennia. Scholars gasp and shuffle them together, convinced they're finally catching a glimpse of his original handwriting or at least his systematic approach. The notion that remnants of his actual celestial notations have endured centuries of storms and neglect feels both magical and maddening. The debate simmers on, just as it always has. How advanced was his mapping technique, really? Did he intend for his charts to assist sailors in navigation, or were they merely for academic testing among fellow scholars? Was he charting for practical navigation, or was it a declaration that the universe adheres to a measurable order? No consensus exists yet, only a long yawn from audiences during symposiums where professors passionately disagree over minute details and translated fragments. Beside you, Hipparchus shakes the lamp gently, ensuring its flame remains bright. Lines of ink glisten faintly before settling into permanence, his dots transforming into gentle reminders of stars long to be remembered. He proceeds without embellishment, without ornamentation, just dots and lines, akin to a cosmic attendance list. Yet, there's an unexpected comfort in this simplicity. There's something reassuring about reducing the infinite expanse above into a tangible sheet you can hold. The sound of papyrus crinkling, dots imprinted on the fine fiber, an entire universe compacted into a handful of easily identifiable symbols. Night after night, Hipparchus devotes himself to this ritual, allowing the vastness of heaven to become a catalogue, transforming stars into lengthy sentences devoid of grandeur, all meticulously ordered by the steady flow of his pen. As your thoughts drift, you imagine your own reflections intertwining with his celestial mapping, each thought a tiny dot in the expansive canvas of the night. The night air feels softer now, infused with simple routines rather than the weighty philosophical musings that often fill the mind. Hipparchus isn't always an otherworldly figure, gazing up at the stars with grandeur. At heart, he's just a man who enjoys his bread, ties his sandals snugly, and gets a little cranky when his neighbors step on his olive shoots. As you observe him jotting down numbers tonight, it becomes clear that a crucial part of his story is floating just out of reach. To truly connect with him, you must immerse yourself in the rhythms of his life on Rhodes, the life of a diligent skygazer. Picture this: the day breaks with the clamor of merchants. You can hear donkeys braying, vendors energetically shouting about their goods, fresh olives, ripe figs, and fish just pulled from the Aegean. The salty scent of anchovies wafts up the hill. Hipparchus grabs a simple breakfast, likely bread torn by hand and generously dipped in olive oil. He's not the glamorous sage robed in flowing fabric at dawn. Instead, he's just a man balancing a jug in one hand and a wax tablet tucked under the other arm, desperately trying not to spill either. In the grand scheme of things, Rhodes in the 2nd century BC was a vibrant hub of trade and knowledge. Its strategic location put it at the crossroads of Greece, Egypt, and Asia Minor. This meant that an astronomer like Hipparchus had access to ships bringing scrolls, instruments, and ideas from across the sea. He lived within a thriving network of thinkers, not in some lonely tower, with the lively surroundings fueling his work, even if he sometimes grumbled about the boisterous harbors disrupting his focus. And here's a quirky little tidbit. Ancient accounts suggest that Hipparchus had to defend his actions from neighbors who questioned why he would spend countless nights peering into the darkness. You can almost picture one of them leaning over the fence, muttering, "There goes Hipparchus again, staring into space until dawn. He must be avoiding his wife's chores." You can't help but chuckle at the mental image of him mumbling in response, "Actually, I'm charting 26,000-year cycles of axial wobble. But sure, let's call it chores I'm avoiding." Historians still debate whether Hipparchus had any formal teaching position in Rhodes, or if he operated primarily as a private scholar, relying on the support of patrons. Some assert he was involved in civic projects, while others envision him hunched alone, living simply, creating his magnum opus without a steady income. This disagreement lingers because, let's face it, ancient biographies of scientists are often as thin as watered wine. As night descends once again, you see the everyday routine taking shape. A modest supper of lentils or fish stew, followed by some diluted wine. The lamps are lit, and then, with a touch of reluctance, he drags his instruments up to the rooftop. Gnomon, dioptra, armillary sphere. By now, his neighbors have grown accustomed to him. They know the old mathematician will be muttering numbers until the sun begins to rise, like a persistent rooster that won't stop crowing. To them, his life may seem dull, but to you, trailing behind him like a sleepy shadow, it has a strange, captivating allure. In daily life on ancient Rhodes, people adhered to predictable habits, harvesting olives in the autumn, pressing grapes in late summer, and celebrating festivals dedicated to Helios throughout the year. Hipparchus likely participated in the festivities just enough to be polite, yet never let the celebrations pull him away from his nighttime observations. If revelers danced at the harbor, he most certainly watched the stars above them, mentally rehearsing the coordinates of Lyra while someone below spilled wine on their toga. A fringe detail? Some later accounts say he sought the advice of astrologers or interpreted omens for wealthy patrons, producing horoscopes he probably didn't genuinely believe in. Perhaps he was lured by the promise of coins, but there's also the chance he relished the opportunity to incorporate observational data into his scholarly work. Imagine him feigning interest in someone's fortune while he discreetly noted the timing of an upcoming eclipse. The perfect multitasker, part cosmic bureaucrat, part reluctant entertainer. You huddle tighter into your cloak as the sea breeze sweeps in. The lamps flicker at the edges of the city. By now, his schedule is all too familiar. Prepare, eat, wait, ascend, observe, scribble. It's so routine that a yawn escapes your lips in sympathy. Yet that very monotony is what brings comfort. Just as the stars reliably rise and set, Hipparchus' life reflects that dependable rhythm. With its predictable patterns, uneventful dinners, and nightly trips to the roof. He adjusts a lamp, squinting at the wax tablets sprawled before him. You lean closer, the air thick with the aroma of olive oil and smoke. He mumbles about dim stars, and you nod absently, your own thoughts drifting towards sleep. The truth of it is, daily life wasn't glamorous at all, and that's exactly the point. He wasn't an epic hero. He was more of an accountant for the heavens, a devoted bureaucrat camouflaged as an astronomer. Meanwhile, down at the harbor, sailors methodically extinguish coals and tie knots in their usual fashion. The scent of fish guts hangs heavily in the air. Nearby homes hold children swaddled in sleep, lulled by their mother's soft tales. And above it all, Hipparchus makes another tiny mark, another faint star observation, another soothing item on his list. Watching him engage in this cycle night after night surprisingly provides comfort. If boredom can be a form of solace, then Hipparchus is the ideal bedtime companion. He eats, he scribbles, he mutters, he yawns. His entire existence, much like yours right now, intertwines with the consistent hum of everyday life. The rooftops are quiet tonight, and Hipparchus is busy scribbling again. If you listen closely, though, you might start to notice something strange, an emptiness surrounding him. Yes, you can hear the donkeys braying in the distance, an oil lamp sputtering beside him, and the rhythmic scratch of his stylus against wax. But what's missing? The lively voices of apprentices sharing their observations or students eagerly asking about the moon's latest position. In a sense, he seems alone. It's a curious fact, brought up gently so it doesn't startle you. Unlike some philosophers like Plato, Aristotle, or even Ptolemy, Hipparchus left behind scant evidence of a school or a circle of disciples. There aren't many records of students continuing on his methods. His work feels less like a vibrant tradition passed down and more like a rediscovered collection folded into others' writings. For someone whose precision was unmatched, his legacy has a surprisingly muted tone. As you inch a little closer, you can't help but wonder if anyone was ever around to fetch his lamps or to copy his notes. A quirky tidbit pops up. Some scattered ancient accounts hint that he might have had a few assistants or copyists, but their names seem to have vanished, if they were ever noted at all. Picture one sleepy teenager grumbling, "Master Hipparchus, must we catalogue yet another faint star tonight?" Only to be sharply hushed. Maybe the poor helper eventually opted for a brighter future in fishmongering, leaving behind the tedious task of counting stars under the Aegean moon. Historians continue to debate whether Hipparchus was naturally reclusive, purposely avoiding a gathering of students, or if the lack of records is merely the result of time eroding what we've lost. Some argue that the silence around him proves his solitude. Others caution that many ancient teachers are only faintly remembered. The discussion isn't purely about what evidence exists but more about the nuances of interpretation, and yet it buzzes on, like bees buzzing around half-empty flowers. You gaze up into the night sky beside him. Imagine dedicating years to compiling lists of stars and cycles, uncertain whether anyone in the next generation would even appreciate it. He crafted catalogues that transformed astronomy, yet perhaps there were nights he sighed with frustration, wishing for an enthusiastic student to double-check the faint constellations beside him. Even those brilliant minds can sometimes feel a bit lonely. But here's a comforting thought. Whether or not he had disciples, the slow preservation of his work by later authors means he found followers, just not in his lifetime. Visualize those scholars centuries later, unrolling papyri and murmuring, "Ah, this aligns with Hipparchus." Or, "We'll just incorporate this into something they'll call the Almagest." They became accidental followers, caretakers out of necessity. His students may not have echoed his teachings during his time, but their impact rippled through the ages. A fringe theory from historians suggests that Hipparchus might have exchanged knowledge with passing wanderers, sailors, surveyors, or interested astrological clients. If that's true, his teaching style could have been less about grand lectures and more personal one-on-one chats. Yes, sailor, if the lunar eclipse occurs 2 hours later in Alexandria, you're this far east. Now pass the bread. Not exactly the drama of a Socratic dialogue, but nonetheless an effective way of sharing knowledge. As the night stretches around you, the absence of those vanished students feels heavy yet strangely calming. There are no voices debating nearby, no noisy arguments over constellations, just the steady scratch of Hipparchus writing. That sound lulls you deeper into relaxation, like a soothing rhythm coaxing you towards sleep. The solitude, in its own way, is perfect for winding down. Nothing unsettles you, nothing distracts. Just one man, one lamp, and the quiet ticking of stars glowing overhead. A gentle reminder, despite his probable solitude, his influence has resonated magnificently through time. Medieval Islamic astronomers, Renaissance mapmakers, even the field of modern astrophysics all trace threads back to his careful catalogues. Those solitary wax tablets transformed into considerable star charts across the globe. His loneliness, much like your contemplative moments awake at night, became a rich ground for timeless ideas to flourish. You lean back now, listening as his wax stylus squeaks across tablet after tablet. He murmurs softly to himself. Perhaps he's noting coordinates, maybe venting about troublesome ink. but whatever he says fades into the background like calming static. His absent followers, if they ever existed, won't interrupt this peaceful moment. It's just you and him. The harbor lies asleep. Roofs are hushed around you. Hipparchus continues his work, undistracted by thoughts of legacy or acclaim. Whether he had forgotten students or not, he presses on with his self-imposed duty, treating the vast skies as his only true audience. You can't help but smile a bit, recognizing the irony. After 2 millennia, we're still here listening, finally keeping him company. You blink slowly as your vision softens. Solitude becomes a comforting pillow. Hipparchus' mutterings, the memory of absent apprentices, and his gentle obsession, they hum softly like lullabies in the still of the Rhodian night. The night air in the courtyard feels especially cool tonight, with gentle sea winds whisking through the narrow alleys of Rhodes like a slow exhale through hollow shells. Hipparchus sits down, lifting another scroll into his lap. You can sense that this moment is different, not the usual solitary catalogue of stars or his notes on Babylonian eclipses. This scroll hums with the faint weight of another presence, the name of Claudius Ptolemy, who, centuries from now, will weave Hipparchus' quiet lists into the grand tapestry of the Almagest. It's a well-known fact that Ptolemy's grand textbook on astronomy, crafted in the 2nd century CE, stands as one of the ancient world's most significant scientific contributions. Yet, hidden within its pages, you can feel Hipparchus' influence, his star catalogues, his definitions of brightness, his questions about precession, and his careful lunar notes. Without Hipparchus, Ptolemy's masterpiece might have resembled more of a patchwork napkin than a monumental text. You catch a glimpse of Hipparchus muttering to himself, comparing his tables against earlier references. Oblivious to the future that awaits him, he has no idea that Ptolemy will absorb his work entirely, reassembling it into a system that will reign unchallenged for over a millennium. A soft smile tugs at your lips, poor Hipparchus, the unseen ghostwriter of the cosmos. Here's a quirky tidbit to ponder. Medieval critics once accused Ptolemy of outright plagiarism, claiming he merely copied Hipparchus' catalogue without giving credit. Imagine the world's longest unacknowledged group project, akin to copying a classmate's homework and gaining fame for it. If that's true, you can picture Hipparchus rolling in his grave in Rhodes, shaking his head and thinking, "At least cite your source, man!" Historians still debate this topic with an obsession that borders on comical. Did Ptolemy painstakingly observe the stars himself? Or did he primarily recycle Hipparchus' previous entries? Some scholars champion Ptolemy as an original observer, while others firmly believe he leaned heavily, maybe even excessively, on his predecessor. This disagreement lingers through dusty conference halls where scholars sigh into their tepid coffee. Back in Hipparchus' courtyard, though, those scholarly disputes are centuries away. What truly matters is his steady hand, crossing stars into meticulous lists, securing magnitudes into grids. He's too absorbed in organizing the sky into categories to concern himself with future recognition. You can almost see him, head in hands, muttering in Greek, "Record positions meticulously, or someone will misinterpret your findings later." And he wasn't wrong. Another well-known note. When Ptolemy published his famous system, it became the standard across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East for more than 1,200 years. The geocentric model, placing Earth proudly at the center, persisted in collective thought, partly because Ptolemy's Almagest was treated as if it were scripture. Yet many of its sturdy foundations, quietly, belonged to Hipparchus. And here's another tidbit that might intrigue you. There are tantalizing references to Hipparchus making critical remarks about another Alexandrian figure, Aristarchus of Samos. Aristarchus had the audacious idea that the Earth might orbit the Sun, an astonishing thought for his time. Hipparchus may have shot this down, preferring the simplicity of geocentrism for the sake of his tables. If true, it shows he was either too sensible or too stubborn to risk cosmic heresy. He opted for order over chaos, repetition over revolution, which suits your needs tonight just fine. Picture him now, deeply focused on a scroll that centuries later will be discreetly woven into someone else's grand opus. You see him, mid-bite into a fig, blissfully unaware that he'll mostly be remembered as a footnote in history. While this might seem unjust, it's oddly comforting. Sometimes, The unrecognized creators are the most delightful company at bedtime. They bring no fanfare, just quiet diligence, happily toiling away at their lists. You exhale slowly, feeling how Hipparchus' connection to Ptolemy envelopes you like a heavy blanket, layers of texts resting upon one another, muffling the noise of frantic discovery into a warm, steady calm. It's not the dazzling shock of new insights. It's the familiarity of recycled study notes being reshaped over and over until they define the education of nations. In the distance, a cat yowls near the harbor, perhaps annoyed because someone forgot to share fish scraps at dinner. But for Hipparchus, and for you right now, such distractions fade into insignificance. The scrawls of magnitudes and faint circles on papyrus drown everything in a tranquil hush. Hipparchus writes, Ptolemy will later replicate, and both processes become lullabies that ease you into a restful sleep. The lamp flickers dimly, shadows stretching longer across the cobblestones of the courtyard. Hipparchus hunches over his notes, his pen scratching away as you notice a certain sadness wrapping around him. It's not the grand theories of brightness scales, or the tilt of Earth's axis, or the meticulous loops of the moon's path. No, it's something almost haunting. Entire portions of his star catalogue are slowly fading away, even while he's still alive to witness it. The harsh truth settles in the stillness. Much of Hipparchus' original work has been lost to time. What survives today comes mostly from later references, most notably in Claudius Ptolemy's famous Almagest. Without these later mentions, the countless names, coordinates, and quiet calculations he carefully recorded would have disintegrated completely, lost to decay, forgotten amidst the ashes of library fires. Unlike Aristotle's polished, well-structured essays, Hipparchus' legacy consists of fragile drafts and rough notes, enduring only as long as they are fortunate enough to persist. A quirky detail floats through your mind, some fragments that have made it to the present day, their papyrus fibers discovered centuries later, tossed aside as packing material in Egyptian trash heaps, hint that parts of Hipparchus' star catalogue may have survived into Roman times, only to vanish later. Just picture it, your life's work. Countless nights spent mapping the faintest stars, finding a home between scribbled records of donkey feed or oil taxes. It's both humbling and unintentionally amusing. Scholars still debate the recently unearthed fragments found in Oxyrhynchus and other palimpsests. Did these actually preserve remnants of Hipparchus' lost catalogues? Or are the academics merely projecting their hopes onto these fragments? Some scholars believe they see within those faded letters the precise coordinates marked by his observational techniques, while others argue that the evidence is too scant to draw any conclusions. Picture a group of contemporary researchers hunched over with magnifying glasses, arguing over smudged letters like detectives piecing together cosmic clues. The lively discussion hums like an undercurrent against the quiet of the night. Hipparchus continues to scratch away, the lamplight casting shadows across his weary face. Perhaps he worries about what will actually endure. The numbers, the coordinates, the tired lists? You can almost imagine him fretting. Will anyone take the time to copy this before the moths come? 2 millennia later, the bittersweet truth is that very little of his original voice has endured. Yet somehow enough echoes remain that we find ourselves here, in a quiet corner of the digital world, still pondering his legacy. He shifts his stylus, murmuring, "A star near Scorpio's tail." He records the coordinates. But if you lean in closer, you won't find the dot he's describing in the sky, only the dot lingering on his tablet. The heavens remain unchanged in their brilliance tonight, yet his wax tablet, as fragile as any life's work, is already softening in the humidity, ready to slip into obscurity. Another mainstream detail, repeated softly for sleepy minds. Hipparchus is credited with naming and charting around 850 stars. That figure resonates, soothing in its exactness. 850, lying neatly, like beads strung on a thread, like breaths counted before sleep. Some fringe speculations drift in. Could Hipparchus have documented stars that are no longer visible? Maybe novae, those stars that flare brilliantly and then fade away. It's possible that those faint notes he meticulously recorded marked stars that later disappeared from sight. There's a strange comfort in this thought. His lost catalogue might hold echoes of stars that only he noted before they flickered into oblivion. Imagine the melancholy. His lost writings could be the only testament to suns that have long since vanished. The scholarly discourse around this possibility persists with polite but tireless vigor. Were some of those non-matching entries simple observational mistakes, or do they hint at shifting stellar brightness? The question never finds resolution, instead lingering like the soft music of the sea lapping against the shore. You shut your eyes, swaying gently with the ebb and flow of uncertainty. A comfortable embrace in the not knowing. Hipparchus lets out a slow sigh. Nearby, you can hear faint coughing from his neighbors in their sleep. You feel it, the heavy weight of forgotten work pressing against the night, like unsung lullabies. The maps we will never uncover, the dots that will never be confirmed, the fragments that turn to dust. Yet beneath this loss, there's a peculiar solace. Not everything must stay. Some lights blaze brilliantly, only to fade, leaving a calmness in their absence. He gazes upward, unaware that in just a few thousand years, people will look back at the starry skies through expansive observatories, holding complex catalogues his mind could never even begin to imagine. And yet those simple scratches he made, dull dots and faint lines, are quite literally the foundation upon which all of this rests. Much of his work may have disappeared, yes, but other pieces continued to breathe within later texts, their legacy echoing in an empty hall. You recline softly, surrendering to the rhythm. Write, lose, remember, forget, rediscover, debate. It's a cosmic cycle, a slow, steady ebb and flow. The stars do remain above you, unchanged, while Hipparchus, here below, battles against being forgotten with nothing but his weary persistence. You, too, wrestle with your fading thoughts, swapping a stylus for a pillow. The lost maps blur your vision, until you can't tell if you're seeing stars, or just his faint dots drifting into the darkness. The sky over Rhodes feels different tonight, larger somehow, even though everything remains the same. The stars continue to twinkle in their ancient patterns, and the olive trees whisper softly in the gentle sea breeze. Yet deep down, you sense a change within yourself. For countless nights, you've followed Hipparchus, his wax tablets, his armillary spheres, his relentless calculations, and his quiet complaints. Now, it dawns on you that this man, who often seemed to wallow in meticulous boredom, has given you something profound. An unexpected sense of order. Mainstream knowledge slips in quietly, like a soft footstep on the ground. The constellations that Hipparchus mapped are still there, shimmering in the night sky above you. Sure, their positions have shifted a bit due to precession, but Orion still raises his bow, the Pleiades still gather closely, and Vega, as bright as ever, continues to sparkle in the summer sky. We now observe them through satellites and telescopes, yet Hipparchus' carefully marked stars are still the very foundation of our celestial maps. This continuity feels comforting, like an old lullaby that keeps its melody intact even when the lyrics change. Here's a quirky thought. Imagine Hipparchus ranking those same stars by their brightness, blissfully unaware that today's app developers would do something similar, assigning 5-star ratings to everything from restaurants to TV shows. It seems everyone is still following in Hipparchus' footsteps, evaluating things with an addictiveness that borders on obsession. But he did it quietly, with patience, one faint dot at a time, never actually dreaming that his seemingly dull records would achieve a kind of immortality. Historians still debate the details, of course. Discussions about whether the Oxyrhynchus papyrus truly belongs to him, whether Ptolemy borrowed more than he acknowledged, whether Hipparchus ventured beyond the shores of Rhodes. The arguments buzz along, but you can't help but smile. In a sense, these very debates keep him alive. The fact that people still discuss his measurements shows that he hasn't disappeared from our collective memory. You lift your gaze to the sky once more. Each constellation he documented remains there, indifferent yet oddly comforting in its unwavering presence. You think of his faint engravings, his weary lamp flickering in the shadows. You recall his gnomon standing tall in the dirt, and the armillary sphere clanging like an oversized piece of jewelry in the courtyard. You feel your own tiredness reflecting his, quiet, heavy, and unavoidable. The stars persist, yet sleep pulls you in closer. Hipparchus remains seated in his observational world, but you find yourself slowly fading, drifting downward, your own coordinates slipping away into dreams. Now, my friend, let the pace of life wane completely. You are no longer perched on rooftop stones or straining to pick out the faint glimmers of light. Instead, you are lying back, your body relaxing and melting into the mattress like warm wax beside those ancient tablets. The night is no longer a demand, it feels vast, steady, and patient. Imagine the stars as your quiet companions. They don't need to dazzle or astonish. They have been casting their unhurried light for countless generations, outlasting empires that rose and fell, surviving fires that consumed scrolls, and scribes who hunched over their tables. Their current purpose is to provide you a soothing sense of calm, gently echoing Hipparchus' whispered lists into infinity. Your breathing becomes in sync with the slow rotation of the earth itself, gentle, consistent, subtle yet steady. Inhale, exhale. This is a cycle older than any city, quieter than any library. Just as Hipparchus relied on his careful dots making a difference, you can trust that every soft breath guides you deeper into rest. The constellations will be above you again tomorrow night, and the night after that, just as they were for Hipparchus. You don't have to remember their exact coordinates. You don't need to rate their brightness, nor worry if they shift over 26 millennia. Instead, let them carry you in their vast, serene embrace as you sink deeper into relaxation. So, allow your eyes to soften. Let every minute detail slip away like papyrus disintegrating harmlessly into sand. The world is charted, the catalogue is sufficiently complete, and the heavens are more patient than any anxious thought could ever hope to be. Good night. May the ancient sky surround you gently. Sweet dreams.